It begins with a quote on Edward Lorenz's theory that the smallest change dramatically influences the course of history. Suddenly a door is kicked open as a patient of the mental institution is trying to escape. He takes his box of possessions and pulls a blank diary from it as Evan begins frantically writing inside. He says that the only way someone will ever read the letter is if he fails in his mission, and as security locates him his final words are to save her. We flash back to 13 years earlier where young Evan struggles with his single mother to get the car started. Andrea tells her son that his father's unable to make it to their parent night as it's too dangerous for him. With the car running, she drops Evan off at school when his teacher Ms. Boswell requests to have a word, and shows off Evan's drawing where he's depicted himself killing skinheads in prison but says he doesn't remember making it. Worried of what this could mean, Andrea takes him to Dr. Redfield, who runs scans to check if the problem is physical. Waiting on the results, Andrea plans to leave home for work, but finds Evan in the kitchen holding a knife that he drops and claims not to remember how he got hold of it. Worried about the amnesia but still needing to make money to support them, she drops her son off at his friend's house where George is going to mind him. He's the father of Evan's best friend Kaylee and her scoundrel brother Tommy, who we see is talked down to by his father. When the pervy George starts to film them play, Evan experiences another blackout and is suddenly standing with Kaylee in the basement. He takes his clothes and returns with his mother to Redfield, who suspects the blackouts to be the result of psychological trauma, and recommends Andrea take Evan to visit his father in hopes that it'll help. He waits anxiously to greet his dad, who walks in secured by chains and heavily sedated to remain calm. Jason's seemingly forgotten why he's there and seems friendly at first. Then within the span of a blackout he's on top of Evan, strangling him. The guards make it in time and hit Jason so hard in the back of the skull that he dies and is buried, with Kaylee attending the funeral to support her friend. Not too much changes over the next 6 years, and the friends still hang out in George's basement getting up to no good. Tommy's grown up a troublemaker of the highest order and out of boredom brings them to a stranger's home to pull a prank. He coaxes their new friend Lenny into placing an explosive inside a mailbox that Evan attaches a cigarette to extend the fuse. Despite not wanting to do it, Lenny does the deed to fit in, and they wait for the results. While the overly protective Tommy notices Evan getting close to his sister. We cut to the friends stumbling through the forest with Lenny now catatonic and Evan having no clue how they got there. They carry the injured boy home where Tommy perpetuates a lie that they were just playing in the woods, and unfortunately his sister protects him and Evan has no memory of the truth. He's maintained his journals for all these years as a therapeutic coping mechanism. When one day coming across his grandfather's death certificate showing that his father's insanity is a hereditary trait of the males in the family, his therapy sessions turn ugly when trying to access Evans's memory of the events, causing a violent nosebleed. When seeing a movie with Tommy, he asks about his blackout and is threatened to never speak of the explosion again. When Evan then tries to ask Kaylee, he discovers that her father beats her but hides it under her clothing. The two friends kiss when the mentally unstable brother approaches to attack Evan but is tripped over by an older student. Embarrassed, he uses a metal bollard to attack the bully before being dragged away by security with a smile. The couple decide to go to visit Lenny at his home, where he sits in his room making hobby planes all day long. When the traumatized boy hears that Tommy's not with them, he's willing to go outside, but they come across him somehow still not arrested, and this time about to burn a dog alive. Evan tries to stop him but again has another blackout and wakes up the clear loser of their fight. With the dog dead, Tommy missing, and Lenny just going through it, Andrea hears on the news that a stick of dynamite's devastated the community, with police searching for the culprit. So suspecting the worst, she packs up and moves town, leaving Evan to promise Kaylee that he'll come back for her. 7 years later, and Evan attends college with his roommate and best friend Thumper. He never saw Kaylee again, but one night Evan brings home a date who's not there for 2 minutes before locating the man's trauma. Evan goes to read a journal entry when the letters begin to come alive and he suddenly remembers what happened during a blackout, which is you'd suspect that Tommy clobbered him and threatened Lenny that he'd slit his throat should he try intervene. Unsure if this is a memory or dream, Evan returns to his hometown to get answers. He visits Lenny, who doesn't seem to have moved in 7 years and is now surrounded by his creations. Evan's come to ask if he remembers what Tommy said to him when he killed the dog, which Lenny remembers word for word and relays in an intimidating fashion like it was told to him just yesterday. Realizing the diary can help him recall his lost memories, Evan reads the entry from the day of the explosion and is transported back. He burns himself while distracted, witnessing a mother and her child approach the mailbox, when the dynamite goes off and kills them both, which is what left Lenny with the trauma. When he wakes from what seems like a dream, Evan now has a scar from the cigarette, making it apparent that he physically rewrote his past. He meets his mother for dinner, where Andrea tells him that his father also experienced the same blackouts. When leaving the restaurant, they visit a fortune teller who says that Evan has no soul and was never meant to be born. This strikes a chord with Andrea, who reveals to her son that she was pregnant twice before him but both were stillborn. One moment Evan struggles to remember is the time in Kaylee's basement, which Thumper says is probably because it's so horrific. So Evan decides to visit his old friend to find she now works as a waitress at a crappy diner and is a shell of who she once was. She's in good spirits to see Evan when he brings up the worst day of her life, which still haunts her. Kaylee doesn't say what happened, just that if Evan liked her so much, why did he never come back like he said he would? The next day Evan receives a message from Tommy, blaming him for his sister taking her own life due to the memories he brought flooding back. Evan is unable to attend her funeral because of the real reason and comes back when he's gone to pay his respects. With his new scar as inspiration, Evan uses a page from his journal to occupy his younger self and convince George never to harm his daughter again, or else the time traveler will return to castrate him next time. Returning to the present, Evan wakes in a strange room and has a nosebleed when hit with a sudden influx of new memories from his life with Kaylee, who's now his girlfriend, and they attend the same college together. Life seems perfect except for the fact that Thumper now has no memory of their friendship, and Evan's best friends with the frat boys who would harass them previously. That night he treats Kaylee to a romantic dinner when he's informed that someone has trashed his car but nobody saw who done it. Evan realizes it was Tommy by a dog collar left behind and begins frantically trying to understand why he still turned out evil. When Kaylee says that her father never laid a hand on her but instead took out his frustrations on Tommy, Evan decides to walk her home when Tommy confronts them as he blames Evan for taking away his sister. He wails on him with a metal bat until Evan pulls pepper spray and blinds him, and is able to use Tommy's own weapon to bludgeon him to death, leaving Kaylee mortified. Evan is sent away to prison for murder, as I guess that wasn't self-defense, and meets a religious inmate named Carlos. Andrea visits her son and has brought a bunch of his journals but not the ones he can easily fix the past with. She thinks she's found a lawyer who can get him off on self-defense, but Evan hasn't got that long. As the Aryan attacks are becoming frequent, the Brotherhood leader Carl's been laying threats on the new guy and has his boys beat him down when he tries to stand up for himself. Evan's told by the leader that he'll return for him tonight, only to realize that the creep's taken the only diary that can help him change the past. One of the pages he got away with allows him to at least convince Carlos that he's telling the truth. After drawing the picture of what he wishes for Carl, Evan slams both hands down on paper stacks, returning to an utterly convinced Carlos who assumes it's the work of Jesus. They come up with a plan to get close enough to Carl which isn't too hard, then quickly stick him with a shiv and have Carlos hold the cell closed while Evan uses the book. This time he finds Lenny a blade to cut the dog free and convinces Tommy not to go through with killing it. But Lenny instead uses the shard of metal to stab Tommy in the back, killing him. With a missed swing of a log, a large marks left across Kaylee's face, and all of Evan's good memories with her are replaced by ones of her leaving town and Lenny being committed. He's free of prison, but the more Evan time travels the worse his condition becomes. And he's told that it's the same condition that drove his father crazy. On his way out of the hospital, Evan visits Lenny, who hasn't spoken in a long time, but is finally able to ask Evan how he knew that they would need a knife to save the dog. Evan outright admits that he can see the future, so Lenny angrily says that Evan's the one who deserves to be locked up. Now with access to all of his journals, Evan goes to visit his father in the past to get some real answers. Jason went through the same thing and says that there's no way to fix it and that Evan can't continue to play God. Evan doesn't believe that, so that's why Jason tried to kill him to prevent the curse from continuing. Returning to Kaylee's house in this timeline, Evan demands to know from George where she is and is directed to a derelict neighborhood. Kaylee's now sporting a large facial scar and is working as a call girl, having completely given up. The two go to a diner where Evan reveals the truth by telling Kaylee about all of the things that she loves, or would have loved had she lived with the opportunity to do so. She leaves either thinking he's a liar or worse, telling the truth, and is responsible for how things turned out. Determined to fix things yet again, Evan returns to the time of the explosion and saves the lady and child, but gets himself blown up in the process. When he wakes up, Lenny was never traumatized by the experience, but the brainwave of new memories reveals that he's now in a relationship with the woman Evan loves. He's also missing limbs from the explosion and is required to be wheeled around through campus by the couple. Somehow Tommy's now religious after he shielded the lady just to pretend like he's a hero, but truly made a change in life and is now a genuinely good person. Hearing from Kaylee's own mouth that she's in love with Lenny, Evan tries to drown himself but is saved by Tommy, who's now one of his close friends. They visit his mother, who's dying in the hospital from lung cancer, caused by a lifetime of stress smoking over dealing with Evan's condition. Andrea notices Evan's acting like his father did at the same age, and begs him not to leave as Evan promises her that he's going to make it all better. Having no arms means that Evan never wrote about the explosion in his journal, so with the help of Lenny he returns to an earlier date to destroy the explosive before they ever used it. He's caught by his mother with a knife and returns instantly, explaining the scene but now needing to return to George's basement instead. He finds where Tommy kept it hidden and wants to light it and throw it away, but George tries to wrestle it from him and it rolls to the feet of Kaylee. With her death, Evan was institutionalized and he wakes up at the hospital demanding his journals from Redfield. The doctor says that in this reality the journals never existed, and that his father would also talk about photos that didn't exist either. Realizing that he can use other memories, Evan ignores his weeping mother, who's just got the news that Evan doesn't have long to live due to the irreversible brain damage caused by the time traveling. We've now caught up to the beginning where Evan takes refuge from the guards inside Redfield's office. He uses a home video of Andrea giving birth and travels back to the beautiful moment to strangle himself in the womb with his umbilical cord to prevent the multi-generational curse from continuing. We flash forward and see Andrea now has a daughter, meaning that a third male won't have to go through these same shenanigans again, like Evan and the two before him probably did. Kaylee and Tommy moved to live with their mother since the only reason she stayed with her dad was to be close to Evan, and the only reason Tommy stayed was to protect his sister. And the movie ends.